alongside government partners. So there's a process outlined in the Nunavut Agreement on how decisions are made on wildlife issues for the by the Nunavut Wild Management Board. The structure of the NWMB, the decision makers are appointed by government and also Inuit organizations. And they are supported by the staff. Myself as the executive director, we have a team here of wildlife biologists, administrators, and our job is to make sure that the board members have the information that they need to make informed wildlife management decisions. So if there are any questions, I'll do my best to answer.
So, you haven't answered it, but let's ask it again to get a really clear note.
Hi, Jason.
Yes, yes.
My first question is, can you help us better understand the difference between what the NWMB staff do and what the board does? The differences?
Yep. So the board members, again, are appointed by government agencies and Inuit organizations. So a full board would be 9 members. And their role is to make the decisions about wildlife. So for instance, if there's a quota, or the term we use is a total allowable harvest, so they would be making the decisions about what total allowable harvest, or TH, would be for polar bears, for caribou, which the board has done. I think that the staff level is to make sure that they have the information that they need to make those informed decisions. So the board members, so at the staff level, the information that the board members would need to consider when they're making a decision are the existing legislation that might be in place, the Fisheries Act, the wildlife orders and regulations, but also the framework within the Nunavut Agreement, and also any policies that we have internally that they would need to consider. So the staff provide this information, oftentimes as a summary, for the board's consideration for when they make that decision.
Thank you.
Our job in the process to, yeah, that's good.
Hi. Question. What exactly is a public hearing and how does it work?
Yep. Public hearing is if there's a government proposal, for instance, to set a TAH in place for polar bear. The NWMB has an option to hold a public hearing, and it can be either an in-person public hearing or written public hearing. But in either case, it is an invitation for the public at large in Nunavut, but also outside, to provide their input, to provide their knowledge on an issue about the proposal, for instance, to set a TH on polar bears. I'll take an example. Recently, a recent in-person public hearing that we had on the Nunavut Polar Bear Co-Management Plan. Back in November 2018, the NWMB held an in-person public hearing on the government proposal of the polar bear plan. Now, for that there was hearing parties that had a right to provide their input if they wish to do so. So you had all the HTOs from Nunavut and all the RWO chairpersons at this meeting alongside with government. And at that hearing, there was an opportunity for the HTOs and the public in general to question government about the proposals that they had in the plan and to provide their input. And that's a process whereby the board members, the NWMB, can consider that information and then make their decision based on information from Inuit, from HTOs, RWOs, NTI, and government, and so on.
Thank you for that answer. My name is Luan Somik. I'm from Welco. Can you tell us what caused their population to go down and what the NWMB has been doing about it? This is in Baffin. About the caribou.
Yeah, I think that the consensus on that is that their populations go through cycles, and Inuit have said that about not just for the Baffin caribou, but also other caribou populations and Kivallik, for instance, and the Katatmit, that they go through cycles, and that at this time, the caribou in Baffin have been going down at the low cycle. And I think some of the considerations at this time were that caribou, can come back up, the populations can go back up, but that harvesting pressure and other activities could delay that recovery. So I think at the time, the board made this decision to set a TAH of 250 for Baffin, recognizing that to give the caribou an opportunity to reduce pressures on them, to enable them to come back to a population where hopefully the opportunity to remove that harvest limit can happen in future. So the answer, I think that is the low cycle of a population cycle. And what we're doing is that at the NWMB, we don't conduct research ourselves, but we provide funding to government to conduct research. So the NWMB has been funding the Nunavut government to conduct composition surveys for caribou. And in addition to, actually, the NWMB contributed its position on how best to protect caribou. And the position of the NWMB is to have no industrial activity in caribou calving areas.
Hi Jason, my name is Lexi Patel from Nunavut. What is the best part about working in the fields with wildlife?
Sorry, I didn't quite catch that question.
What is the best part about working in the field of wildlife?
Yeah, thank you. I think, from my own personal experience, before I was with the NWMB, I was with Environment Canada. And primarily the mandate of where I was migratory bird research. So for that, for me, it was going out into the field in Nunavut, going into some of the areas and being out, seeing different parts of Nunavut in areas like Lancaster Sound, for instance. There's a big migratory bird colony. Being out there for the research, but also the experience of other wildlife in that area. And now with the NWMB, I have a different role, but the joy that I get from this is that I think striving to make sure that Inuit have a role in our decision process. I think for me that is historically, I think that Inuit had a lesser role in terms of kind of the wildlife that were managed here in Nunavut, but I think the NWMB has enabled and is working towards always making sure and how we can enable Inuit better in our decision process. And that's been kind of one of the best parts for me working here at the NWMB.
Can I take this? Hi, my name is Brendan and I'm from Nayat. Do you think we will get to a point where every animal we hunt in Nunavut will have a TAH?
I hope we don't. I think that the TH is a kind of a maybe considered kind of a last resort when we have to consider those options. But I can tell you a lot of people don't like having a TAH, and I can, from my own personal experience, I used to have been here in the college for some time now, and I remember being able to hunt caribou kind of freely. And now that we have TAH, that opportunity is way less than my experience from before, and other communities don't like it, and I understand why. I think that there's opportunities for communities and HTOs to kind of manage in such a way that it doesn't have to get to that. I can think of Kamanavjak caribou. There's no limit set on them, but I know there's some concerns about social media being used to sell caribou and so on, and how that might be impacting that population. I think that it's an opportunity there to avoid kind of setting a TH for that herd potentially down the line, and if it's not something that the communities want, it's an opportunity for Inuit to kind of manage in some ways. So, the answer to that is I hope we don't have to.
Hi, my name is Manu from Iqaluit. Do you see the Inuit perspective about wildlife changing from our elders to how you view things now?
Sorry, can you repeat the question, please?
Say it slower.
Do you see the Inuit perspective about wildlife changing from our elders to how you view things now?
Yeah, good question. Yeah, I think that past harvesting practices have probably changed. There's always, technology is a big factor in current hunting practices now than from before. Kind of how we can kind of communicate the, spot devices, in-reach devices, and also kind of the machines we have now are much more fuel efficient than from the past. So I think some of that has affected some of the harvesting practices that were done in the past than they are today. Yeah.
Hi, this is Savannah from Palm Beach. Congrats on your marriage. I have a question. What accomplishments do you think the NWMB should be most proud of?
Yeah, thanks, Savannah. I think, we're always striving to learn and to evolve and to grow, but some of the things I think that we've accomplished, I think, is a good collaborative system with working with government, but also, most importantly, with Inuit. I can think of this polar bear plan. I think that the polar bear management plan, polar bears are important to Inuit, and the matter can be quite heated sometimes, but we managed to work with Inuit and government. And I can think of the recent example now. The NWMB is moving, or the Nunavut is moving to a 1-to-1 male to female harvest ratio. Before it was a 2-to-1, where every 2 males for every 1 female was harvested for polar bears. But I think that, the 1-to-1 harvest system is pretty controversial outside of Nunavut. There's some critical views in Canada, but also internationally about this. But I think the NWMB and the government too heard the concerns by Inuit about the 2-to-1 system, its impact for public safety in their communities, how complicated this is, and the confusion it creates for communities. And the board and the government had opted to move from a 2-to-1 to a 1-to-1. And I think that just shows kind of a good collaborative process between Inuit and government. And hope that answers your question.
Hi, my name is Nadine from Rankin Inlet, and I wanted to ask you what have your biggest challenges been at the NWMB so far?
Thank you. I think it's as the NWMB is an institution of public government, one of the mandate is to operate in an open and transparent process. And I think it's challenging to be able to communicate some of the decisions or initiatives that the NWMB does to the communities, because they have some limitations in terms of kind of how to access that information. And so I think one of the challenges is better communicating sometimes to some of the communities about initiatives that we're doing, and coming up with better ways. We have a Facebook page, we have a Twitter account, but of course there's not everybody in the communities necessarily use Facebook or Twitter, and those are some of the people that we want to be able to reach. And so that has been an ongoing challenge, and how can we communicate what the NWMB is doing, what Inuit can do better to help us make decisions that affect them.
Hi, this is Annie from Kimmerup. What do you think is the difference in managing wildlife from before the land claims and after?
Thank you. I think that through the Nunavut Agreement and also through the Institute of Public Government, the NWMB being one of them, but also the Nunavut Impact Review Board, the Nunavut Planning Commission, and the Water Board, I think it's provided a better avenue for Inuit to be more meaningful participants in what goes on in Nunavut. For us, wildlife management decision making as the Wildlife Board, I think it's provided a better avenue for Inuit to provide their views, knowledge, expertise on issues that the board can consider when they're making wildlife management decisions. I think historically, there's government and so on probably did not have as much input from Inuit that they should have had. And since the creation of Nunavut, I think that not just in wildlife, but also on environmental assessment issues, Inuit have a greater voice from which they can provide their views. I can think of Baffinland, for instance, NWMB, where the NWMB is holding public hearings to consider information about that process.
Hi, this is Jonathan from NWMB. What advice can you give NSers who want to work in the field of wildlife after graduation?
Yeah, good question. I think that there are some opportunities available to get some experience to see if this is something that you want to do. Where I used to work at Environment Canada, they've got the Inuit Field Research Assistance Program that gives Inuit an opportunity to go out into the field, to work in the office in wildlife, to get a sense of what opportunities there are. And I believe that there are some other opportunities in the other departments, but I know that where I worked before, Canadian Wildlife Service, there was that opportunity. And I think that, we have, we provide funding through a scholarship for those pursuing post-secondary education in wildlife, where you can apply to get some support. And I think that there are opportunities to look at those options and to get some experience.
Hi, my name is Alaswa and I'm from Iqaluit. My question is about sports hunting, and I was just wondering if it brings a lot of benefit to communities.
Good question. I think that's not information necessarily that the NWMB has data on, but I know that the board has had to make decisions about setting limits for harvest. So I think that alone can be an indicator that it is important for communities to have that option. There are limits, for instance, on grizzly bear sport hunts, on caribou sport hunting, but HTOs in communities in the West particularly have expressed interest in having a greater share of sport hunting activities. And I think that shows you that can be important. How important it is community-wide or perhaps locally to an HTO, it's hard for me to know.
Thank you for talking to us today.
Yeah, thank you for the opportunity. I'm happy to.
One more question.
Yes.
Hi, this is Tanya from Colvocus. I have a question. With the climate change and its impact on wildlife, do you think the NWMB would need to propose emergency hearing or some sort?
Good question. I think that if that is of concern to communities or the government, it would definitely be something to consider, whether it's through a public hearing or a workshop to kind of address some of those issues. If a community, for instance, expressed concerns about the effect of climate change on wildlife populations and they wanted it addressed, the NWMB would have that option to hear the evidence from the communities and likely also too from NTI and other government partners to come up with ways of addressing that.
Well, that was the last question. Thanks so much for taking your time, Jason. We learned a lot from you.
Thank you. Good day.
Yes, my name is Desi.
I'm trying to say something funny here. Is Jason still there? No. No? Okay, cool. He's so nice, man. He knows a lot of stuff. So, did you guys, how is your note taking? Show me, like, it was really good, it was like,
It's always
no
here
good.
for life.
Yeah? No. If you feel like it's here, the whole reason you're at NS is to keep getting better, right? Woo! So what I'm going to do, I'm going to get Melissa because she wanted to talk to you guys about voting. And then don't forget, we're going to have a quiz about this on Monday morning. And Monday, Tuesday, we're going to be studying for your exam. And we'll try to have your exam on Thursday. Sound like a plan? So it's a lot of work, but I think you guys can do it. And we'll just push really hard until Harris, you have one more week. So if if you're thinking your note taking was not so good, I recorded this class on YouTube and I'll put it on Slack after, so you can always go back and listen to be prepared for your quiz on Monday. Cool? Nice. So let me get Melissa.
I might check it on my
Nice. This is perfect. Yeah. Good time. You didn't even need to pull me up with
Are you guys excited to go see artifacts?
Yeah.
Alright, so we're gonna meet downstairs at 1 o'clock sharp, okay? And I'm gonna take the first people everybody that are ready to go, and Larissa's gonna get the tail end of everybody, okay? So we'll have me in the front, Larissa in the back, nobody gets lost. Yes, right here. We'll walk across the bridge to Gatineau. Yeah,
watch out for the French police.
And I sent the directions. You have it on Slack. Okay? No one should get lost because you'll be following me or in front of Larissa. If you do get lost, the directions are on Slack, and I have the handout here. This happens every year. Students kind of go this way or that way. They pick up something on the way and then they lose the group. So at 1:30, we're going to meet at the guest registration at the Museum of History. Okay? It's all on Slack, and I have a handout here if you guys want to grab one on your way out. No, you don't need an NTI card. It's going to be a guided tour of artifacts. We will split in A and B. There's going to be a few different presentations throughout the afternoon, and then we'll be done at 4 o'clock to walk back here. Okay, so they have it all laid out for you guys.
You're going to see cool stuff.
How long is the walk from like there?
It's not that long. Less than half an hour.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can we leave our bags here?
Yeah, leave your bags here. If you want to take this map and directions and program agenda for the afternoon, it'll be right here. Okay?
Is there a bus there?
Monday we're voting for the federal elections. I hope you're all going to be here. Maybe. Yeah? Okay. That's the plan.
We should.
Yo, for sure. You need them,
My cousin used to say everything is cool when you work.
I think so. So yeah.
That's so true.
Yeah, I kind of
That made me so nervous, but like I was still one of my you remember?
I only just saw a glimpse of him because I was rushing to school. Like
Yeah, Mariah?
Right?
I don't even know how.
I'm so sorry about that, man. That was so fun.
I think it's when I was looking at Twilight stuff. Yep. One of their neighbors asked. I think.
What, you Twilight?
Oh my gosh, I'm talking like real.
Don't give it to me in person. I want you to put it in the box in my office. Just because sometimes I'm talking to people and I might drop it. So there's a big red box, and there you go.
Did you get that
On your desk? Yeah, I picked it up. Hi.
I was going boom, 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 boom with land claims with the Australia girl.
Oh, I heard. I walked in. I was like, whoa. And Mackenzie Valley Pipeline. And James Bay. Whoa. Cool. I was really proud of you. Awesome.
And then I said out loud, holy shit, it's been 2 years since I took land claims.
I was really excited. Oh my gosh, I'm still recording. Yeah, that was cool. Thanks for sharing, Lindsay.
My pleasure.